Welcome to E-Pathshala. I am Dr. Vishal Jadhav from Tilak Maharashtra Vidya-mitra Pune, and today we are going to discuss on a module called Division of Labor of Emile Durkheim, which comes under the paper called Classical Sociological Theory. Now, most of you might actually know Emile Durkheim was one of the sociologists of the 19th century and who was also known as a structural functionalist. What is interesting is he tried to assess how human society had moved towards modernity, and in the process how did the division of labor change from what it was prior to when modernity set in. Now, this is very interesting because he argues that as we moved from the pre-modern to the modern, our division of labor became much more specialized, much more interrelated, and much more hierarchical. This is a very interesting module that we will be studying, in which we will look at how our societies are organized and how our life worlds are organized around these structures. Division of labor includes separation of the workforce into different categories of labor, dividing the work required to produce a product into a number of different tasks that are performed by different workers. Durkheim specifically defines division of labor in the following words: social harmony comes essentially from the division of labor. It is characterized by cooperation which is automatically produced through the pursuit in each individual of his own interest. It suffices that each individual consecrate himself to a special function in order, by force of events, to make himself solidary with each other. Mechanical solidarity or solidarity by similarities. In mechanical solidarity, social cohesion and integration occurs as a result of the commonness or the homogeneity of the individuals. Example: individuals believe they are connected through similar work, value systems, family, kinship, religion, etc. As defined by Durkheim, social solidarity based upon homogeneity of values and behavior, strong social constraint, and loyalty to tradition and kinship. The term applied to small non-literate societies characterized by a simple division of labor, very little specialization of function, only a few social roles, and very little tolerance of individuality. As Durkheim has stated, mechanical solidarity is the solidarity of resemblance. It is rooted in the similarity of the individual members of society who might share same desires, feelings, and ideas towards the production of any given point of time. In the society where this kind of solidarity prevails, individuals do not differ from one another much. They are the members of the same collectivity and resemble one another because they feel same emotions, they hold the same values, and they share the same things that are sacred. They are very similar in thought, in process, and activity. The society is coherent because the individuals are united by a common bond that unites them towards a common goal. They are not yet differentiated. Here we find the strong states of the collective conscience. As the term suggests itself, it refers to the conscience of a group of people who would probably share the same ideals as presupposed in the notion of mechanical solidarity. According to Durkheim, he defines collective conscience as the sum total beliefs and sentiments common to the average members of society. This prevails mostly in primitive societies. The common conscience completely covers individual mentality and morality. By this, it is implied that the common or collective conscience takes it into view or consideration individual opinion or ideas. That is why it is called common, because it envisages the common good, which is not only the common good but also a socially agreed good. But sometimes, because of the reality of the common or collective conscience, individual conscience may seem contrary to the expectation of the collective, and therefore it might be repressed. In his own words, Durkheim says, here, social constraint is expressed most decisively in repressive, severe criminal law, which serves to maintain mechanical solidarity. Coming to organic solidarity, according to Durkheim, when the density of individuals increases to such a level that a new system of organization takes its place, where each of them are highly specialized in their respective areas but have to depend on each other to sustain their work interests, this is called organic solidarity. According to him, a type of social solidarity typical of modern industrial society, in which unity is based on the interdependence of a very large number of highly specialized roles in a system involving complex division of labor that requires the cooperation of almost all the groups and individuals of the society. This type of solidarity is called organic because it's similar to the unity of a biological organism, in which highly specialized parts or organs must work in coordination if the organism or any of its parts is to survive. It is quite clear from the above quote that organic solidarity is in opposition of the concept of mechanical solidarity. While in mechanical solidarity, there is no differentiation in organic solidarity. Just like in differentiated biological cells, there is a high level of specialization and specificity of differentiated organs designated for different functions for the completion of a given function or task. According to Durkheim, increasing density of population is a major key to the development of division of labor. So automatically there is division of labor so as to maximize production and profits in the corporate world. Organic solidarity emerges with the growth of division of labor. Division of labor and the consequent dissimilarities among men bring about increasing interdependence in society. The interdependence is reflected in human mentality and morality, and in fact of organic solidarity itself. The individuals are no longer similar but different. In this way, each possesses complete autonomy in his area of expertise. Unless the individual errs, then there would be no difficulty of arriving at any given consensus, because it is easy to arrive at a consensus. It is precisely because the individuals are different that consensus is achieved. According to Durkheim, with the increase of the division of labor, the collective conscience lessens. This has been explained above. An increase in organic solidarity would represent moral progress, stressing the higher values of equality, liberty, fraternity, and justice. This greatly highlights the ethical dimensions for division of labor and its call for an evaluation. Division of labor and civilization. In determining the principal cause of the division of labor, Durkheim distinguishes it first from civilization. According to him, civilization itself is the necessary consequence of the change which are produced in the volume and the density of societies. If science, art, and economic activity develop in accordance with the necessity which is imposed upon men, it is because there is for them no other way of living in the new conditions in which they have been placed. From the time that the number of individuals among whom social relations are established begins to increase, they can maintain themselves only by greater specialization, harder work, and intensification of their faculties. From this general stimulation, there inevitably results a much higher degree of culture. From this point of view, civilization appears not as an end which moves people by its attraction for them, not as a good foreseen and desired in advance of which they seek to assure themselves the largest possible part, but as the effect of a cause, as the necessary resultant of a given state. It is not the pole towards which historic development is moving and to which men seek to get nearer in order to become happier or better, for neither happiness nor morality necessarily increases with the intensity of life. They move because they must move, and what determines the speed of this march is the more or less strong pressure which they exercise upon one another according to the number. In Durkheim's sociological contention, he doubts that the advance of civilization increases human happiness in any case. But civilization does bring about some change. Or put in another way, the changes we may experience affect civilization. But civilization presupposes advancement, which to the human mind at any given period is a good given. But the supposed good that brings about could be abused just like any other things which are useful yet are abused. But he does admit that we enjoy pleasures which were unknown to earlier societies. These pleasures cannot be enjoyed in exactly the same way because civilization brings about something new. Therefore, some newness is being added to previous pleasure. Otherwise, as we learn in economics, there would be diminishing returns if nothing new ever comes up. If the social progress does produce more pleasure than pain, Durkheim insists this would not necessarily bring more happiness, for according to Robert Allen Jones or Emile Durkheim, pleasure describes the local, limited, momentary state of a particular function, while happiness describes the health of the physical and moral species in its entirety. Pleasure could be momentary, but happiness is lasting. And if civilization is properly used, then it can realize happiness in us, for happiness lies not in civilization, in man, but it can be predicated only of humans or as something which humans possess. Coming to division of labor and the happiness hypothesis. In the previous section, we discussed Durkheim's views on civilization in relation to happiness and in relation to division of labor. Durkheim rejects the fact that function or cause of division of labor is advancement in human civilization. This was particularly true, a proposition of Adam Smith. He also denies that the cause of division of labor is humans' unceasing desire of happiness. Durkheim does insist that the intensity of any agreeable stimulus can increase usefully only between two extremes. An increase in monetary wealth, for instance, must be of a certain size if pleasure is to be the result. Inversely, a person thoroughly accustomed to large increase in wealth estimates the value of such increases accordingly and is equally denied pleasure proportionate to the stimulus thus received. The increase in income experienced by man of average wealth is thus the one most apt to produce a degree of pleasure proportionate to its cause. Therefore, understood from the above quotation, if the cause of the division of labor were the desire for happiness, therefore social evolution must surely have come to a stop long ago. For the maximum happiness of which men are capable would have been achieved through a relatively moderate development of social differentiation and its resulting stimuli. According to the above quote, the desire of happiness cannot be the cause of division of labor. If this were the case, then social evolution would have come to an end, because man or humans would have long obtained the happiness he or she desires through low level of social differentiation. Durkheim also argues against the fact that pleasure, which is at least an element in happiness, loses its intensity with repetition and can be recaptured only through new stimuli, meaning more productive work, and hence through the division of labor. He thus objects, first, such a law would apply to all societies, and thus it could provide no account of why the division of labor advances in some societies and not in others. Second, Durkheim denied the assumption on which the argument is based, namely that repetition alone reduces the intensity of pleasure. So long as our pleasures have a certain variety, he argues, they can be repeated endlessly. Only if the pleasure is continuous and uninterrupted does its intensity wane. Therefore, he rejects the view of happiness or pleasure being the cause of the change in society and division of labor. The cause of division of labor, according to Durkheim, must be sought in some other social context. Durkheim shows in his dissertation how the organized structure and thus the division of labor develops as the segmental structure disappears. Thus, either the disappearance of the segmental structure is the cause of the division of labor or vice versa. Therefore, according to Durkheim, we have seen the segmental structure is an insurmountable obstacle to the division of labor. The later hypothesis is clearly false. The division of labor can thus appear only as a proportion of the segmental structure that has already begun to disappear. This means that instead of social life being concentrated in a number of small, identical individual segments, these parts begin to extend beyond their limits, exchange movements, and act and react upon each other. Durkheim calls this dynamic or moral density and suggests that it increases in direct ratio to the progress of the division of labor. But what produces this moral density? Durkheim points out two causes. First, the real material distance between members of a society must be reduced both spatially and technologically. For such, material density multiplies the number of intra-societal relations. Second, this effect is reinforced by the sheer social volume of a society, that is, the total number of its members. Thus, Durkheim argues that the division of labor varies in direct ratio to the dynamic or moral density of society, which is itself an effect of both material density and social volume. But how, one may ask, does this double produce its ultimate effect? Durkheim, in fact, agrees that a diversity of external circumstances has this differentiating effect, but he denies that this diversity was sufficient to cause rather than merely accelerate an effect so dramatic as the division of labor. For his own explanation, Durkheim turns to Darwin's Origin of Species, arguing that an increased material density and social volume causes the division of labor, not because the increased exposure to the diverse external circumstances, but because they render the struggle for existence more acute. This is based on Darwin's comprehension of competition, or the survival of the fittest. Darwin had argued that as long as resources were plentiful and population size was limited, similar organisms could exist alongside in relative peace. But where population increases and resources become scarce, conflict and competition ensue. And this conflict is just as active as the organisms are similar and pursue similar needs. When organisms are different and pursue different needs, on the other hand, what is useful to one organism will be of no value to another, and conflict will diminish. Therefore, a great division of labor, those organs which disappear may establish themselves further by specialization in some other way to adapt to changing situations and responding to needs. Thus, the conflict and competition resulting from an increase in social volume and density produces advances in division of labor, just as the latter mitigates against the negative consequences of the former. In modern city, for example, large and highly condensed populations can coexist peacefully as a consequence of occupational differentiation. The soldier seeks military glory, the priest moral authority, the statesman power, the businessman riches, the scholar scientific renown. Each of them can attain his or her end without preventing the other from obtaining theirs. Therefore, inferring from previous arguments, nothing in this process, Durkheim adds, implies an increase in happiness or that the pursuit of happiness might be its goal. On the contrary, everything takes place mechanically as a result of an inexorable law of social progress. Further, Durkheim thus argues forcefully that the division of labor is caused by changes in the volume and density of societies. But this was not yet a complete explanation for Durkheim. He recognizes that such specialization is not the only possible solution to the struggle for existence which may ensue. The division of labor is thus a contingent rather than a necessary consequence of change in the social environment, and for it rather than its alternatives to result. It is essential that the influence of at least two secondary factors, the conscience, collective and heredity, be significantly reduced. In this line of thought, therefore, insofar as the conscience collective thus becomes less concrete and decisive, it necessarily has less of an impact on individual thought and behavior. Thus, deliberated movements have not the spontaneity of involuntary movements because it becomes more rational. The conscience collective becomes less imperative, and for this very reason it wields less restraint over the free development of individuals. The abnormal forms. At the end of the division of labor in society, Durkheim does note that there can be problems in society. These could be moments of crisis or conflict. There are two abnormal forms of division of labor. These are the anomic division of labor and the forced division of labor. Division of labor itself does not always function as well as it could in modern society because of these abnormal forms. The anomic division of labor may arise as a result of industrial and commercial crisis. There may be a partial break in organic solidarity. A break in this implies that a consensus may be difficult to arrive at any one component, which may complete the given task that could be lacking. Also, there could be a conflict between capital and labor, which may lead to unusual situations. Part of this is caused by increased separation of employee and employer under capitalism, so that conditions for a lack of solidarity are expanded as capitalism and division of labor develop. Irregular forms such as crime are not treated as part of breakdown, rather these are treated by Durkheim as differentiation, not part of division of labor. Durkheim compares these with cancer rather than with normal organs. The real problem for breakdown or abnormal forms is a lack of regulation or a weakened common morality that can occur in society. For instance, in the economic sphere, one would realize that there are no rules which fix the number of economic enterprises, and there is no regulation of production in each branch of industry. This might be an overall form of irrationality. There can be ruptures in equilibrium. Capital-labor relations may become indeterminate. In the scientific field, there may be great separation of different sciences. This is quite self-explanatory and explains just what has been discussed above. But the aspects of sufficient moral constraints further brings out the necessity of a moral dimension when it comes to division of labor. Durkheim also discusses the conditions of the worker under capitalism, very close to what Marx is trying to talk about in terms of alienation and exploitation. He discusses the degrading nature of division of labor of the worker, the possibility of monotonous routine, and the machine-like actions of the worker. However, Durkheim does not consider these to be the normal form, but one which results in the worker does not have a sufficient vision of the whole process of production. Coming to forced division of labor, the other anomaly is where the division of labor is not allowed to develop spontaneously and where some act to protect themselves and their position. Here, division of labor might not be voluntary, something obstructs its natural flow. There is bound to be a breakdown in this process. Some of these which could cause a breakdown could be in the traditional forms which are external to the division of labor, could be caste or Weber's status groups or Marx's classes. Any factors that prevent individuals from achieving positions which would be consistent with their natural abilities indicates a forced division of labor. This is quite evident in today's society and could greatly affect outputs. Any interference with the operation of the division of labor that results in the position being filled by those who are not most apt for the position would mean forced division of labor. In some societies where the rich and strong rule, one could experience that bribes or unqualified people or nepotism could lead to this kind of forced division of labor. So, from the module now it is very clear what we have learned is that according to Durkheim, human society moved from a system which was based on informal relations or face-to-face relations to a system based on formality. In this system of formality, of modernity, in which no one knows each other face to face, yet all relations are based on specific rules and certain kinds of conditions of modernity itself. Now, this is very interesting because this is what Durkheim had to say, that we moved from the mechanical solidarity, which was a kind of a solidarity in which the division of labor was based basically on gender, and it was not highly specialized, but we had to move into that phase because of modernity and because of bureaucracy into various roles, into various kinds of identities and various kinds of stratifications. And therefore, what we see is we moved into a more of an organic kind of solidarity in which everything has to be interrelated, yet all this is based only on formal relations. And therefore, formal relations can also lead to a situation of anomyness.